Ya da 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 da. Ya da ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 dum bum bum da da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. La la la. Ya da da da. Ya da da. Na 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 na. Na na. Ya na na. Na na na. Ya da 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 dum. Ya da 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 da. Ya na 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 na. Ya da 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 da. Ya na 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 na. La la da 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 ya da da na da 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 da. A good Moed! Welcome, everybody. Great to be with you. The first night of Chol Moed. We are in the intermediate days of Sukkot. I hope that your Sukkot is going beautifully. It is a time of joy. It is literally the time of joy. This is called the Festival of Sukkot, the time of our rejoicing. Let's light up the darkness. Ooh. Who's in the house on a Sunday night kicking off Chol Moed Sukkot? Melissa. It's pulling on me. Come on. I see Nancy up there. Nancy in North Carolina. Wait a minute. Nancy in North Carolina, Bill in Missouri, Melissa in Great Neck, Sandy in Michigan, Bella in Florida, Shandora in the Bronx, Karen in Northern California, Sharon in New Jersey. Welcome, everybody. Let's get busy. Our daf tonight is Memches, page 48 here in Tractate Kiddushin, the 20th volume of the Talmud. We are continuing our discussion, and we're going to finish, God willing, our discussion of Mishna number 2 here in chapter 2, and we'll enter Mishna number 3 tonight. Just double checking. Yeah, Mishna number 3 tonight. Okay, so here in Mishna number 2, we've been discussing betrothal, what this tractate is all about. Generally, you do that with money. You can do it with a document. You can do it, if that's what they intended, with sexual intercourse. But in this idea of money and document, we have this sort of ambiguous area. Well, what if he's holding a security, like a promissory note that somebody owes the guy money? Can he use that promissory note, which represents the debt that somebody owes him, and give it to the prospective bride that he wants to betroth her? He has to give her something of value. Can he use that promissory note? Maybe. Apparently, he can do it if he makes the transfer properly. And if he doesn't make the transfer properly, no. The general rule seems to be that with a loan, you cannot betroth, meaning if she owes him money that he gave her some time earlier as a loan, forgiving the loan is not the same as transferring something of her to her of value. Even though loan forgiveness has tremendous value, he's not literally giving her something at that time. So generally, you cannot betroth with a loan. But then where it gets much more nuanced is, well, what if somebody owes you money and you're going to transfer that debt to her? Now he owes her. Aren't you giving her something of value? Will it work? Will it not? Let's see. So we were continuing this discussion about transferring a promissory note to her. And we're at the very bottom of 47b. If you wish, say instead, everyone is of the opinion that the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rav Papa, and even Rabbi Meir agrees that she is betrothed only if he wrote in the document, let it be acquired by you, it and all its liens. In other words, a promissory note that you want to transfer to a third party, right? Somebody owes you money, and so they gave you a promissory note to secure that debt. Now you're holding this note that shows that this person owes you money. Can a man transfer that note to her and use the value of that note to create betrothal? So it has to be a proper transfer. And so there's some debate among the sages about how you transfer a property, how you transfer a promissory note. Is it enough to hand it to a third party? Is it enough to hand it to a third party in the presence of witnesses? Is it enough to hand it to a third party in the presence of witnesses and there's a document that shows that that promissory note was transferred, or a separate document, and in that separate document it says, I'm transferring this promissory note to so-and-so, it and all of its liens. And unless you take all these required steps, you haven't really transferred the promissory note to that person. And so if you haven't really transferred, if the man hasn't transferred it to the woman, then he hasn't created betrothal with her. And here they disagree with regard to the statement of Shmuel, as Shmuel says, now we're on 48a, in the case of one who sells a promissory note to another person, and he, the seller, went back and forgave the debtor his debt. Think about that. I am holding a promissory note that you owe me money. I don't know when you're going to pay me, so I sell this note to my friend Tom. Now, Tom, you owe him the money, right? Because let's say I made a proper transfer of the promissory note to Tom, so now you owe Tom the money. What if I go back to you and say, you know what, that money that you owe me, don't worry about it. I forgive that debt. Do I have the right to do that? I don't have the right to do that. I just sold him the promissory note. So what happens if I actually go and do that? In the case of one who sells a promissory note to another, and he, the seller, went back and forgave the debtor his debt, it is forgiven, since the debtor essentially had a non-transferable obligation to the creditor alone. And even the creditor's inheritor can forgive the debt. It can be explained that one sage, i.e. the rabbis, is of the opinion that the ruling is in accordance with the opinion of Shmuel. Since the man can forgive the debt, the woman will not rely on her ability to collect using the promissory note she received for her betrothal. And the other sage, Rabbi Meir, is not of the opinion that the ruling is in accordance with the opinion of Shmuel. The woman relies on her ability to collect using the promissory note and is betrothed. So it's possible that I could sell a promissory note and then go and forgive the debt. The guy who's bought the promissory note from me, he's suddenly out of luck. The thing he bought is worthless. But apparently I can forgive this loan because really the loan was between me and the borrower. Presumably that's a subject for another tractate. It's not like I can just do this, forgive the debt and take money for the promissory note. I'm going to now have an obligation to the guy I sold the promissory note to, right? What I sold him is almost fraudulent in that I destroyed the asset that promissory note represents. But that's for another day. What they're talking about here is if you're using a promissory note to give it to the woman as something of value to create betrothal, have you really given her something or not? And that's going to be dependent on other rulings of different sages, and they all argue with each other about when and how you can actually transfer a promissory note. And if you wish, say instead that everyone is of the opinion that the ruling is in accordance with the opinion of Shmuel, and here they disagree with regard to a woman who is becoming betrothed. One sage, Rabbi Meir, holds that a woman relies on a promissory note that she receives, since she says to herself, he would not leave aside any benefit and forgive the debt of others. And one sage, i.e. the rabbis, who disagree with that position, hold that even a woman who received the promissory note for betrothal does not rely on being able to collect the debt, since she is concerned that he might forgive it. Right? She knows that this promissory note that she's receiving might not have been transferred to her properly, in which case the underlying debt that it represents might not really be collectible by her. And so she's concerned that she didn't receive anything at all. So how can we create betrothal based on that? So having enumerated several possibilities for the dispute in the case of a loan with a promissory note, the Gemara explains the dispute in the case of a loan by oral agreement. Right, so that was, now going back to our Mishna, it said, it discussed, can you create betrothal by giving a woman a promissory note? Maybe. Well, what about simply transferring a loan by oral agreement? There's no promissory note involved. So, Tom owes me $100. I go say to Mary, hey, let's get betrothed. And I don't have any money in my pocket to create the betrothal with, but Tom owes me $100, so we're going to just transfer that loan to you. Now he owes you $100. See, it's like I just gave you $100. Let's be betrothed. Does that work? That's the question. In the case of one who betroths a woman with a loan by oral agreement, with regard to what do the sages disagree? They disagree with regard to the statement of Rav Huna, who quoted a statement that Rav says. As Rav Huna says, that Rav says, if one said to another, I have 100 dinars in your possession, give it to so-and-so. If he stated this in the presence of all three parties, i.e. the one who had the money, the one who was the owner of the money, and the intended recipient, then the intended recipient has acquired it. So maybe if Tom is in the room, when I say to Mary, let's be betrothed with this $100 that Tom owes me, now he owes it to you, maybe it only works if Tom is in the room with us when I say that. Because in the more general case of simply transferring the right to collect $100 from Tom, if I want to transfer that right to some other person, then all three of us have to be in the room together in order to really transfer that debt. Otherwise, Tom still owes me. I'm saying when he pays me, I'm going to pay you. But it's not that Tom is going to pay you directly. We haven't transferred that right. Three people are in the room. That's Rav Huna according to Rav, or Rav according to Rav Huna. Said, so this is a disagreement, right? The majority hold that when Rav said that it can be acquired in the presence of all three parties, this applies in the case of a deposit as opposed to a loan, right? Tom owes me $100. Why does he owe me $100? Is it because I lent him $100? He asked, can I borrow $100? And I lent him $100. Or is it because I took $100 and I said, Tom, please hold on to this for me. And when I come back, I'll ask for it. If I never come back, then you can keep it. But I'm planning to come back and then give it back. So that's a deposit. Now, the difference between a deposit and a loan is when I lend, I can't count on the $100 being available and in Tom's possession. But if I deposit $100 with Tom, well, then the expectation is that $100 is still there. He's holding on to it for me. And whenever I ask for it, I can get it back. Transferring the right to receive that $100 back from Tom to some third party or to use it as betrothal money, that's quite different if it's a deposit versus a loan. So the rabbis hold that when Rav said you can transfer the right to that $100 if all three parties are present, this is in the case of a deposit. But in the case of a loan, which is meant to be spent, Rav did not rule that it can be transferred in this way, since there is no actual money but merely a debt. And one sage, Rabbi Meir, who disagrees with the majority, holds there is no difference whether it is a loan or a deposit. The third party acquires it in both cases. A woman is therefore betrothed if he gave her a loan in the above manner. So the Gemara again suggests, let us say that Rav's statement that one cannot betroth a woman with a loan is subject to a dispute between the Tanaim, the sages of the Gemara, of the Mishna. A Barais betrothed, and Rabbi Lazar is betrothed. And the rabbis say that the court appraises the paper, that the document is written on it. The paper itself has the value of one peruta. She is betrothed, but if not, she is not betrothed. Now that's odd. Didn't we say that you can make a document of betrothal? But that's not what they're saying. This document represents some other issue. It's not about betrothal. Can you use that document to betroth the woman? Answer: the document itself, if the paper itself is worth that minimum value of one peruta, you could use it, otherwise no. So the Gemara clarifies the case of this Barais. What are the circumstances of this document that you're talking about? If we say there's a note of a debt that is owed to the prospective groom by others, then the statement of Rabbi said that a woman can be betrothed by giving her a promissory note. So rather, this Baraisa must be referring to a note of a debt owed to him by her. And they disagree with regard to the law of one who betroths a woman with a loan. Again, that argument that we've been talking about for a while now. Can you betroth a woman by forgiving the money that she owes you? So Rav Nachman Bar betroth a woman by forgiving the money that she owes you. So Rav Nachman Bar says, no, that's not necessarily so. There could be a different case that we're talking about here. With what are we dealing? With a case where he betrothed her with a document of betrothal. Obviously, you can betroth a woman with a document of betrothal, but what if it had no witnesses to it? There conforms to his standard line of reasoning, as he says with regard to a divorce, a get. Signatory witnesses on the get effect the divorce. And the same applies to a document of betrothal. If no witnesses signed the document, it cannot be used for betrothal. And Rabbi Elazar conforms to his standard line of, it doesn't matter whether the witnesses actually signed the get or not. They just have to see that the husband or his agent hands the get to the wife or her agent. That's what creates divorce. Rabbi Meir says, no, the witnesses have to sign the get or the get is not valid. And the rabbis are uncertain if the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir or if it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. Therefore, they rule betrothal is not affected by means of the document, but it is betrothal affected by means of giving an item worth money. And the court appraises the paper. If it has the value of one peruta, she is betrothed. But if it did not, then she is not betrothed. And if you wish, say instead that this baraisa is referring to a case where he wrote the document of betrothal not for her sake, i.e. not for the woman's sake. And they disagree with regard to a statement of Reish Lakish. As Reish Lakish asks, what is the law of a document of betrothal that the scribe wrote not for her sake? And the Gemara clarifies the question. Do we juxtapose? Right. Remember we had this law repeatedly when we were talking about Gittin, right? Tractate Gittin, the laws of divorce, that if a husband wants to divorce his wife, use a boilerplate get, a boilerplate document of divorce, he has to have a document of divorce, a get, written specifically for her sake. It doesn't even matter if he was able to find a get that somebody else wrote for some other woman that they didn't use it, and the husband written specifically for the sake of this wife that he wants to divorce, then the get is no good. Does that apply to a document of betrothal? Does it have to be written for the sake of the woman that he wants to betroth? And they disagree with the statement of Reish Lakish. As Reish Lakish asks, what is the law of a document of betrothal that a scribe wrote not for the sake of this particular woman? And the Gemara clarifies the question, It is unbelievable to me that we're having issues with our upload speed, and I'm sorry that my image is breaking up a little bit. What is this? Check YouTube on mobile. It's just Facebook on laptop is having the problem. Like such a fast internet connection. I apologize. When the image is does the sound continue to flow? Can you just ignore the picture and just keep hearing me? Does that work? Let me know. Let me see what people are saying. Hopefully it's okay. I really apologize. Pain in the butt that we have these gremlins. I'm just going to keep going. So the document of betrothal have to be written for the sake of the particular woman. And so how do we... It's happening on Facebook and YouTube also. I apologize. I don't know what to say. Okay, so where am I? So, do we juxtapose becoming a wife through betrothal to leaving a marriage through divorce and say, just as in the document that causes her to leave the marriage, we require that it be written for her sake, so causes... Let's see if that makes a difference. Seems to be flowing better. I'll give people a chance to find it. Ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da, yai-da-da-da-da-da. All right. Seems to be a better connection. So let us hope for the best here. As Bill says, and we're back. Okay, just checking over on YouTube. I don't know if that's moving or not. Hopefully that'll start moving again. Unclear. Unclear if it's working on YouTube. All right, let me just press a couple more buttons. Okay, I think we're back. All right, my friends. Sorry about that, but looks like we're working now. Okay, so what the question we're examining right now, again, in the broader picture of examining whether we can create Kiddushin, betrothal, by transferring a document from the man to the woman. Does the document have to be worth something in itself? Yes, if it's not actually a document of betrothal. And now just asking about something that is a document of betrothal, what if it doesn't have witnesses? So maybe just a piece of paper being worth a peruta might get us around that problem. And then we also have the issue of what if the document, it actually is a document of betrothal, what if it wasn't written specifically for her sake? So as Reish Lakish asks, what is the law of a document of betrothal that the scribe wrote not for her sake? And the Gemara clarifies the question. Do we juxtapose becoming a wife through betrothal to leaving a marriage through divorce and say, just as in the document that causes her to leave the marriage, a get, we require that it be written for her sake, therefore so too in the document that causes her to become betrothed, we require that it be written for her sake as well. Or perhaps we juxtapose different ways of becoming betrothed to each other. And just as in the act of becoming betrothed by means of transferring money, we do not require that the money be minted specifically for her sake, and he can use any money, so too with regard to the act of becoming betrothed by means of a document, we do not require that that document be written specifically for her sake. Those are the two sides of the dilemma. After Reish Lakish raised the dilemma, he himself resolved it. The verse states, and she departs out of his house and goes and becomes another man's wife. Deuteronomy 24:2. And the verse thereby juxtaposes the verb becoming to the verb leaving. So a bill of divorce and a document of betrothal must be written for her sake to be valid. And one sage, Rabbi Meir, is of the opinion that the law is in accordance with the opinion of Reish Lakish and maintains that she is not betrothed if the document was not written for her sake. And the other sage, Rabbi Lazar, is not of the opinion that the law is in accordance with the opinion of Reish Lakish. And the rabbis, and so therefore, if it was not written for her sake, they are not betrothed. And the rabbis, the majority, are not sure who's right, Rabbi Meir or Rabbi Lazar, about whether the law accords with Reish Lakish or not. And therefore, they view the case as betrothal by means of giving an item worth money rather than get into whether the document was valid or not. They just say, look, you gave her a piece of paper. If the piece of paper is worth one peruta, then there's a valid betrothal. And if not, no. And if you wish, say instead that everyone is of the opinion that the law is in accordance with the opinion of Reish Lakish, so it has to be written for her sake. And with what are we dealing here? With a case where he wrote the document for her sake, but unbeknownst to her. Does she have to know that a document of betrothal is being written for her at the time that it is written for it to be a valid document of betrothal when the guy actually hands it to her? And they disagree concerning the dispute between Rava and Ravina and Rav Papa and Rav Sherevia, as it was stated that these Amoraim engaged in a dispute with regard to the following issue. If the man wrote a document of betrothal for her sake, but unbeknownst to her, and gave it to her for betrothal, Rava and Ravina say she is betrothed. Rav Papa and Rav Sherevia say she is not betrothed. And the Gemara again suggests, so let us say that Rav's statement that one cannot betroth a woman with a loan is subject to a dispute between these Tanaim, as it is taught in a Baraisa. If a woman gave gold to a goldsmith, instructing him, make bracelets, earrings, and rings for me, and I will be betrothed to you as payment for your work. Once he has made them, she is betrothed, right? So the issue they're asking now is, let's say that a woman had some bullion, right? Some raw gold or silver, and she gave it to a craftsman, and she said, turn this into jewelry. Now, she has to pay him in order for him to turn, that raw gold or silver into jewelry, right? That's the payment for his work as a craftsman, as a master jeweler. So what if she says, okay, I owe you that money, Right, so exactly. So she owes him money for the work. Can he forgive the payment that she owes him and betroth her to himself? This is a different kind of, earlier he lent her $100, and now he says, you know what, you don't have to pay me back if we can become betrothed. Here, it's not that he lent her $100, it's that he performed work for her, and she owes him the money, paying him for the work. There's also this issue of that she gave him some gold. He has to give her back the fabricated jewelry using that gold, and she has to pay money for that. But if she says, I'll tell you what, if you forgive the payment, we can be betrothed, is that betrothal? So let us say that Rav's statement that one can betroth a woman with a loan is subject to a dispute between these Tanaim. As it is taught in a Baraisa, if a woman gave gold to a goldsmith, instructing him, make bracelets, earrings, and rings for me, and I will be betrothed to you as payment for your work. So she said that from the outset. Once he has made them, she is betrothed. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. And the rabbis say she is not betrothed until money enters her possession. Right? Because if a man wants to betroth a woman and he's going to use money or its equivalent, he has to give her something to create betrothal. As we've seen, forgiveness of a loan doesn't do it. And apparently forgiveness of a debt that was created just because she owes a wage to this man for creating the jewelry also doesn't work, at least according to the rabbis. But Rabbi Meir says it does work. And the Gemara asks, what are the circumstances of this money mentioned by the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Meir? If we say it means that very money, if we say it means that very money, i.e. the jewelry that she requested, then by inference, the first Tana, Rabbi Meir, holds that even that same money is also not required to be given for her to be betrothed. But she is betrothed as soon as he made the jewelry. Right? You might have thought, okay, she handed him a bunch of gold and silver. She said, make jewelry for me, and we can be betrothed with the money that with the work that you put in to turn the gold into jewelry, and we'll consider that the item of value that you gave me. Right? And Rabbi Meir says that works, and the rabbis say no. Why not? Because in order to create betrothal, he has to hand her something. Now, what's he handing her? Is it just money that was dedicated for the act of betrothal? Or in this particular case, they're not betrothed until he hands her back the fabricated jewelry. What are the circumstances of this money? If we say that it means that very money, i.e. the jewelry she requested, then by inference, the first Tana, Rabbi Meir, holds that even that same money is also not required to be given for her to be betrothed, because she's betrothed as soon as he made the jewelry, even before he handed it back to her. Rather, is the statement of the rabbis not referring to when he betroths her with other money, i.e. the payment she owes him for his service. And they hold that she is not betrothed and conclude from it that Rabbi Meir and the rabbis disagree with regard to one who betroths a woman with a loan, since the payment she owes him for making the rings is like a loan. And the Gemara clarifies that it must be that they hold that everyone agrees that the obligation to pay a wage is incurred continuously from the beginning of the period he was hired to its end, i.e. the obligation to pay for a service begins when the hired party starts to work, and the sum owed increases as he proceeds. Right? You might have thought that you don't owe someone if you hire someone to mow your lawn, right? When and what do you owe? Let's say when we were kids, you could mow a lawn for $10, right? So if I mow my neighbor's lawn, does he owe me $10 only when I finish mowing the lawn? Or if I only mow half of his lawn, does he owe me $5? Right? That's what they're arguing about. And it is therefore, okay, so in other words, how does that apply here? When this craftsman began to work on the silver and gold, did a loan start to be created as soon as he started the work? Or is it simply that when he finishes, she owes him the money to get the jewelry back, which is what she said she would pay for him to fabricate jewelry, and it doesn't become a loan until he finished the work, right? And it is therefore, so in this case, it must be that they hold that everyone agrees that the obligation to pay a wage is incurred continuously from the beginning of the period he was hired to its end, i.e., the obligation to pay for a service begins when the hired party begins to work and the sum owed increases as he proceeds. And therefore, in this case, it is therefore a loan, as when he gives her the finished article, she was already obligated to pay for the work he had performed earlier. And what? Is it not the case that they disagree with regard to this? I.e., that one sage, Rabbi Meir, holds that in the case of one who betroths a woman with a loan, she is betrothed. And the other sage, meaning the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Meir, they hold that one who betroths a woman with a loan is not betrothal. Now, the Gemara rejects this interpretation of the dispute. No, it is possible that everyone agrees that the case of one who betroths a woman with a loan, she is not betrothed. And here, what they disagree over is the question of whether or not the obligation to pay a wage is incurred continuously from the beginning of the period that the person is hired to its end. So one sage, in this case, holds, Rabbi Meir holds, and now we're on 48b, that the obligation to pay a wage is incurred only at the end of the labor when he returns the item to her. Since it is at this stage that he forgives the money due him and converts it to money for betrothal, it was never considered to be a loan. And the other sage, meaning the rabbis, holds the obligation to pay a wage is incurred continuously from the beginning of the period he was hired to its end, at which point the debt is viewed as a loan that has accumulated through the period of hire. And we've already said that you cannot betroth a woman by forgiving money that she owes you. Or, if you wish, say instead that everyone agrees that the obligation to pay a wage is incurred continuously from the beginning of the period he was hired to its end, and they also agree that in the case of one who betroths a woman with a loan, she is not betrothed. And here the case is not discussing a hired worker, but a contractor, who is entitled to payment only upon completion of the job. And they disagree with regard to the question of whether or not a craftsman acquires ownership rights through enhancement of the vessel. Is it viewed that the contractor has acquired the item by improving it and he is then selling it back to the one who hired him? Or is he merely being paid for his labor? One sage, Rabbi Meir, holds a craftsman acquires ownership rights through the enhancement of the vessel. And since he partly owns the jewelry, he can betroth a woman with it. And the other sage, the rabbis, holds a craftsman does not acquire ownership rights through enhancement of the vessel. Very interesting, right? If you hand gold over to somebody, okay, you own the gold, then they put in a bunch of work, and in a sense, it's like you become partners. You contributed the gold, he contributed the work, and now you're going to buy out your partner when you pay him off for the work that he did on your gold. If that is actually what is happening, then he could use his ownership interest in that jewelry to betroth her. On the other hand, if that's not what's happening, but rather you handed him the gold for him to do work on it, and as soon as he set to work, he started accumulating wage payment. You know, you owe him wages. Okay, then from that moment, you start to owe him money. And later he can't forgive that loan and create betrothal because everyone seems to agree that you cannot betroth a woman by forgiving money that she owes you. And if you wish, say instead that everyone agrees that a craftsman does not acquire ownership rights through enhancement of the vessel, and also that the obligation to pay a wage is incurred continuously from the beginning of the period that he was hired to its end. And everyone also agrees that the case of one who betroths a woman with a loan, she is not betrothed. And so what are we actually talking about in this particular case? It is a case where the craftsman added a jewel of his own for her. Now you can see why he becomes a partner in this jewelry, since he added to it. He added a jewel. So now one sage, Rabbi Meir, holds that if the man betroths a woman with a loan and one peruta, his mind is focused on the peruta. And the other sage, the rabbis, holds that his mind is focused on the loan. So in other words, she owes him wages. But he added a jewel to the jewelry. You know, she gave him the gold and silver, and he added a jewel to that. So you could say he can betroth her with it because what he's giving her is this jewel that he contributed to her jewelry from his own reserves. Why can't he betroth her with that? And the opposite point would be, well, he might be thinking about the jewel that he's giving her, but he's thinking even more about the money that she owes him. And if he thinks that he can betroth her by forgiving the wages that she owes him, then they are not betrothed. And they disagree in the dispute between these Tanaim. As it is taught in a baraisa, if one says to a woman, be betrothed to me with the payment for that which I have worked for you, she is not betrothed because it is a loan, since she already owes him the money. But if he said, be betrothed to me with the payment for that which I will work for you, can he say, I will owe you work? I am betrothing you with the work I will do for you in the future. Does that create betrothal? According to this view in that baraisa, yes. If he says, be betrothed to me with the payment for that which I will work for you, she is betrothed. As at the moment he becomes entitled to the money, it is considered as though he gives it to her for her betrothal. Rabbi Nassan says, if he says, with the payment for that which I will work for you, she is not betrothed, as Rabbi Nassan holds, that the obligation to pay a wage is incurred continuously from the beginning of the period he was hired to its end, which means that by the end of the job, it's a loan. And this is all the more so if he says, with the payment for that which I have worked for you in the past. But if he just says, I betrothed to you from with the value of the work I will do, not the payment that you'll owe me, but the value of the work, maybe it would work. And the Baraisa cites a third opinion. Rebbe says, actually they said that the law is that whether he said with the payment for that which I have worked for you, or with the payment for that which I will work for you, none of this works. She is not betrothed. But if he added a jewel to the gold and silver that she gave him, yes, he can use that to create betrothal. And the Gemara clarifies the dispute. The difference between the first Tana and Rabbi Nassan concerns a wage. Is the obligation incurred continuously or only at the end? The difference between Rabbi Nassan and Rebbe is the issue of a loan and one peruta. One sage, Rabbi Nassan, holds that if a man betroths a woman with a combination of a loan and one peruta, his mind is focused on the loan that she owes him, and the jewel is disregarded. And the other sage, Rebbe, holds that his mind is focused on the jewel that he added and not so much on the wages that he's forgiving, and therefore the betrothal is a valid betrothal. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 2 here in chapter 2. Now we do Mishnah number 3. Mishnah number 2 is complicated. Mishnah number 3, I find, makes it's just like easier to get our hands around it, right? What if he promises to betroth her with gold and he gives her silver? Well, sounds like he's giving her something worth less. That shouldn't work. What if he promises to give her silver for the betrothal and he gives her gold? That's worth more. Does that create betrothal? Let's see. Mishnah number 3. If a man said to a woman, be betrothed to me with this cup of wine, and it was found to be a cup of honey. Or he said, with this cup of honey, and it was found to be a cup of wine. Or if he said, with this dinar made of silver, and it was found to be made of gold. Or if he said, be betrothed to me with this dinar made of gold, and it was found to be made of silver. Or if he said, on the condition, be betrothed to me on the condition that I am wealthy, and he was found to be poor. Or if he said, be betrothed to me on the condition that I am poor, and he was found to be wealthy. In all these cases, she is not betrothed. Rabbi Shimon says if he misled her to her advantage by giving her something better than what he stated, or if his status was greater than he claimed, then she is betrothed. So interesting. Rabbi Shimon says what we might have thought makes sense. Well, if he says, be betrothed to me with this dinar of silver, and he gives her a dinar of gold, why wouldn't they be betrothed? But the majority say, no, if you promise to give her something for the betrothal, and it's a specific thing you say, then that's what you have to give. And the fact that you substitute something that you think is better doesn't create betrothal. Here's the Gemara. The sage is taught with regard to one who says to a woman, be betrothed to me with this cup, without further specification. It is taught in one baraisa that the betrothal is effected with the cup and also with its contents. And it is taught in another baraisa that the betrothal is effected with the cup but not with its contents. And it is taught in yet another baraisa that the betrothal is effected with its contents but not with the cup. And the Gemara comments, and this is not difficult, the baraisos excuse me, the Baraisas do not contradict one another. Since this one stated with regard to a cup of water, the other one stated with regard to a cup of wine, and the third one stated with regard to a cup of oil. Let's keep reading. The Mishnah teaches that Rabbi Shimon says, Rabbi Shimon, the minority opinion of our Mishnah, he says, if he misled her to her advantage, right? He said, I'm going to betroth you with a dinar of silver, and he gives her a dinar of gold. That's to her advantage. He's giving her something more valuable. So it should create betrothal. And the Gemara asks, but doesn't Rabbi Shimon accept the statement of the Mishnah, Tractate Baba Basra, page 83a, that if one sells wine and it was found to be vinegar, right? Vinegar is like spoiled wine. It's worth less than wine. But if one sells wine and it was found to be vinegar, or if he sold vinegar and it was found to be wine, both the buyer and the seller can retract from the sale. It's not what they agreed on. Whether the seller gives something of greater value or lesser value than what he first offered, since he changed the deal, either side can retract. Although wine is more valuable than vinegar, the seller is not considered to have defrauded the buyer, in which case only the buyer could retract. Apparently, this is because there is one for whom it is preferable to have vinegar, and there is one for whom it is preferable to have wine. Consequently, receiving wine instead of vinegar is not necessarily better. If so, here too, there is one for whom it is preferable to have silver, and it is not preferable for him to have gold. Why does Rabbi Shimon say that she is betrothed if he gave her gold instead of silver? Maybe, unusual circumstance, but it could happen. She would prefer to receive silver than gold. How can he just assume she wants gold? He didn't give what he promised to give, so no betrothal, according to the majority. But Rabbi Shimon says, yes, betrothal. So why? What's Rabbi Shimon's reasoning? Rav Shimi Bar Ashi says, I found Abaye sitting and explaining this Mishnah to his son. And he said, with what are we dealing here? With a case where one said to his agent, lend me a dinar made of silver and go and betroth for me such and such a woman with it. And he went and lent him a dinar of gold and betrothed her with that. Now, one sage, the first Tana, holds that the guy was particular. He wanted a silver dinar to be used for this betrothal. And that's why she's not betrothed, because the terms of the agency were not met. And the other sage, Rabbi Shimon, holds that he is merely indicating his position to the agent. He stated silver only as a guideline, but he does not care if it's gold as long as the betrothal is created. So the Gemara raises a difficulty. If so, if the case involves an agent, why does our Mishnah state, be betrothed to me? The Mishnah should have stated, be betrothed to him. Furthermore, why does it say he misled her to her advantage? The Mishnah should have stated he misled him to his advantage, as the agent did. As the agent did not mislead the woman, but the one who designated him. And similarly, there's a difficulty with regard to the wording. If it was found to be made of gold, as according to this explanation, from the outset, when the agent gave it to the woman, it was also known to be made of gold. This fact was not discovered later, as was indicated in our Mishnah. I am very close to done. If you got questions or comments, please get them in. So rather, Rava says, I and the lion of the group explained it. And the Gemara immediately interjects, who is the lion of the group? This is Rabbi Hiya bar Avin. Okay, so Rava and Rabbi Hiya bar Avin explained it. With what are we dealing here? With a case where she said to her agent, go and accept betrothal for me from so-and-so, who said to me, be betrothed to me with a dinar made of silver. And the prospective husband went and gave the agent a dinar made of gold. So one sage, the first Tana, holds that she is particular about becoming betrothed with a silver dinar rather than a gold one. And the other sage, Rabbi Shimon, holds that she is merely indicating her position to her agent, but does not care what the agent receives from the man. And what is the meaning of it was found, as it was evident from the outset that it was gold? The Mishnah is referring to a case where the coin was wrapped in a cloth, and the agent was unaware that he was receiving a different dinar from what she requested. So we haven't solved this problem. We'll continue tomorrow at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific, of why is betrothal created when the husband promises silver and delivers gold? Which the rabbis say, no, doesn't work. He said silver, even though he delivered something more valuable, betrothal is not created. Rabbi Shimon says betrothal is created. Do we accept the straightforward meaning? He said, he said to her, I'm going to give you a dinar of silver, and he gives her a dinar of gold. Maybe she didn't even realize it was a dinar of gold until later. And then the question is, was betrothal created or not? Or do we need to reinterpret the case as one of dealing where either he had an agent or she had an agent? And how does that affect our analysis of the problem? Okay, let me get a couple of questions and comments on Kiddushin 48. Bill, just to check I've understood the law correctly, if a woman owed a man a loan, and the man gives her the sum of the loan, but doesn't technically cancel the debt, is that a valid betrothal? What do you mean? Like, she owed him, are you saying he earlier lent her $100? Now, he says, let's get betrothed, and you don't have to pay me back the 100. So that doesn't work. Are you saying, Bill, now he gives her another 100, which she can use to repay the loan? Does that work? I say yes, because now he's giving her 100 at the time that he wants to create betrothal. So I think that does work. But let's continue what you said, Bill. He hasn't strictly canceled the loan, but he's given her the ability to pay it off instantly. Okay, so I understood you, right? On the other hand, if the same man gives his betrothed to be the sum of the loan plus one peruta, is that a different case than the first one? I think if he gives her 100, honestly, she can repay the loan or not, because he gave it to her. And that's the nature of betrothal money, that he gives it to her. They have this other situation that they have a loan between them, and now she has the ability to pay it off. Now, if he says to her, here's 100 dinars for our betrothal on the condition that you pay the loan that you owe me, I think that's a really good question. I don't know what the answer is. But if he gives her that and one peruta, then I think you've raised the question and you solved it, because then there's at least the one peruta, which is non-conditional and satisfies the minimum value requirement and could create betrothal. That's what I've got for us tonight. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Tuesday at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. So sorry about the uploading issue of the video, but it seems to have worked itself out. We're using a different path to get the video upstream, so maybe we'll try that again tomorrow, and hopefully we'll have a good result. Have a great night and a good moed.